I showed up to the party with a 4-pack of Doom Bar Amber Ale, a 4-pack of Stella, and a bottle of Shiraz. That should have been enough for almost everything. I wasn't invited, but my best friend Brian was going to come with his longtime girlfriend Claire. So he asked me to go with him. He actually called me and asked if I could come to the party and watch Claire. He was having problems at work and was going to be late. He didn't like leaving her alone with all the office Lotharios. I was lonely at that moment. It was a birthday party for a girl from Claire's office. She worked as a secretary for a local solicitor, one of the few, so it was assumed there would be 1 or 2 single girls there. Oh, and it was cheaper to go to a blowout party than a pub on a Saturday night. The front door was open, so I walked in and, leaving my drinks in the kitchen, which was full of men and beer, headed out to find Claire. I saw her talking to a guy in the corner of the living room. I saw him shrug and walk away. When I approached her, she smiled at me and said, "I'm glad you're here. Brian's going to be a little late. Some broken down van or something." I told her I knew about it since he had asked me to keep her company. She touched my arm. "Thanks for that. They keep trying to get me to talk. Could you get me a drink, please? I don't want to go into the kitchen. It's like entering a lion's den." Brian worked as a transportation manager for a local delivery firm and called me, saying he would be late because he was going to either fix the van or reload the load into another one so the driver could finish the delivery. He's coming over as soon as he can, so could I look after Claire until he gets here? He was a little nervous about her being alone. It was a party for a girl she knew from work, so it shouldn't be a problem. She'd be able to find someone to talk to. I figured he was a little paranoid, but whatever. He's my buddy, he asked, and I'll do it. Brian and I have been friends since we went to elementary school at the age of 4, which is almost 22 years ago, and we've helped each other all that time. He helped me through my first heartbreak when I saw my then-girlfriend Sharon making out with Charlie. He said we weren't exclusive, and it was actually Charlie's 7th birthday party. I helped him when he didn't make the soccer team when he was 13 in grammar school, and the sports master told him to come back next year when he was taller, healthier, and faster. I sympathized with him, and we started going jogging together. The next year, he made the soccer team and found that he enjoyed running too. Running also helped me get a place as a forward on the school rugby team. Over the years, we got into a few scrapes, mostly over broken windows and being late for lessons because we farted. Setting fire to the trash can behind the sports pavilion when we tried our first cigarette didn't please the principal. A 2-week suspension plus extra homework on lung cancer research made us both give up smoking for life. The bullies decided it wasn't worth taking on 2 of us, and after a while they left us alone. College came along. Brian studied business, and I studied accounting. During college, we continued to play sports. I called him Ponzi because he would run around kicking a ball and falling down as if in pain. He called me a chubby Neanderthal because I would run around and throw myself at other men. And honestly, most of the players I play with definitely look like Neanderthals. Through all this exercise, Brian and I became pretty fit. Brian got a job as an assistant transportation manager, which really meant office dog body and driver when needed. I got a job as an assistant accountant at a local engineering firm, which meant an office dog body and someone who could use a calculator and do simple, boring work. Then cars and beer were added to the girls. Endless days of fun for 2 young guys in good physical shape. Over the years, the company found that Brian had a knack for organization, finding ways to expand the business and work more efficiently. After a few years, he was promoted to deputy transportation manager. I found that the wrong numbers just jumped off the pages at me, either by mistake or on purpose to hide something, and after a few years I became deputy chief accountant. I called him a van balancer, couldn't think of anything worse, and he called me a bean-shuffling Neanderthal, which wasn't far from the truth. Then he met Claire, but that was normal. It was always going to happen. We always knew that one day we would meet the girl of our dreams, and everything would change. We talked about it. I just hoped that I would be the one to be the first to find the woman I would spend the rest of my life with. I liked Claire. She was right for him. He wasn't as reckless. He was more down to earth. It didn't hurt that she was very good looking. 5 foot tall, long black straight hair split down the middle, She was very pretty, and when she smiled, it lit up her whole face. I know I shouldn't do this, but I have to say, the body looked pretty good too. They dated for a little over 2 years. She had moved in with Brian about 6 months ago, but I had heard rumors that she hadn't sold her apartment, but was just renting it out. I didn't often get the chance to talk to Claire alone, so I asked the question that had been on my mind for a while. So when are you two getting married? Subtlety wasn't my strong suit. She looked a little embarrassed. Brian's been dropping hints, but I keep telling him I'm not ready yet. She looked at me as if she'd given away some secret. Don't get me wrong, I really love him. He's kind, considerate, sweet, funny, and very, very nice. I felt something was missing, something she wasn't telling me. So why haven't you made a date yet? I've known him for the last 20 plus years. He's a great guy, a great buddy. And I'm looking forward to being best man so I can mess around with some of your bridesmaids. She got a little serious and I tried to lighten the mood. It didn't work. We were standing in a corner so it was quiet. She turned to face me and put her hand on my arm. Dave. She looked me straight in the eye. It was a little unnerving. I've known you for a few years now, so I know you can keep a secret, but as great as Brian is, there's something missing. Now I was confused. I had seen these two together for the last couple years. They were amazingly perfect for each other. It seemed like they could always tell what the other was thinking. I never know what a woman is thinking, even when she tells me what she's thinking. It's just, well, he is. Damn, this is so embarrassing. Of course, do you have girlfriends to talk to about stuff like that? Oh God, no, I know what they'd say right now. But they're not in love with him. And at least you're his best friend. I put my hand over hers. Look, you can trust me. I love you like family. Anything I can do to help. I don't know if you can. It's just, hell, he's not very good, she whispered. I only got more confused. What do you mean? She raised her eyes to the ceiling. You mean, oh, you mean? I discreetly pointed my finger upstairs where the bedrooms were and then whispered. You mean in the bedroom? She nodded her head. She stood up a little straighter, as if a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. Can you think of anything? What? How the hell should I know? To hell with it. Have you tried talking about it? Tried, but he keeps shutting up. I'm sorry, but I need more. David, I know you can keep a secret. Is there anything you can do to help me? She put her hand on my arm. I shook it off and took a step back like I'd been stung. Well, shit. Hang in there. I'm his comrade. She looked embarrassed now, but then she smiled. No, no, silly boy. I don't mean that. I like you a lot. A lot. I mean, you can talk to him. Enlighten him. Rumor has it you're not bad. Phew, I was relieved. I don't have fun with married women. Well, only once. Okay. Several times with the same one. But it wasn't my fault. She hadn't told me she was married, and she wasn't wearing any rings, and I certainly don't sleep with my buddy's girlfriend. I don't know. I've never been asked that before. It's awkward, but what's the big deal, really? There were tears in her eyes. I love him, but I need more of him, if you know what I mean. That's so unrealistic. I need more beer, and you probably need more wine. I'm not enough for 2 cocktails. I just needed time to think. I sent Brian a quick text to see how long he was going to be and got a reply that he was on his way to their apartment to change because he was dirty. He'd be there in about 20 minutes, maybe less. That gave us 10 minutes to chat and 5 minutes for Claire to come to her senses. I went back and handed her the drink. She drank half of it in one go. She told me that she got a text from Brian that he would be in 15 minutes or so. I told her, We've got 10 minutes, so it might be a bit rough. He's winding you up, isn't he? Yes, but only about half the time. And it's over within 5, 10 minutes? No long, slow, leisurely screws? About that? I sensed she was about to say something else, but held back. I had too much information in my head as it was. She touched my arm lightly. If you could get him to talk about it, that would be a start. Okay, I'll go get him a beer for when he gets here, and you go fix your makeup, and I promise you I'll think about it. I realized why she couldn't talk to her girlfriends. They'd just say dump him and find someone else. But she loves him. Okay, thanks. She looked at me, put her hand on my shoulder, and kissed my cheek. You're like the big sister I can chat with that I never had. I spread my hands up and down her body, towering over her by at least 3 inches. Big sister. Okay, the big brother I can chat with but never had. I'm going to have to start calling you Big Brother. She left to go to the bathroom to fix her makeup. I went and got a few bottles of beer. 2 for Brian since he was standing behind us and he would probably need a beer. He got there before Claire got back from the restroom. On his way through the kitchen, he grabbed 2 mugs of beer. He took one for me so we couldn't shake hands. They were full of beer. I had to fake a manly hug with beer in hand. At this point, Claire reappeared, and I tried to hold on to the 4 beers while he hugged her and kissed her. He apologized for being late and thanked me for taking care of his girlfriend. He invited me out for a beer on Monday after rugby practice to make amends for leaving her to her own devices. I told him it was no problem. I liked her. All for a friend. But since he was buying beer, I was fine with it. He said he would have been later, but when they were halfway through moving the load from one van to the other, the mechanic managed to get the first van started. So instead of putting everything back, he split the delivery notices in half and sent 2 drivers. They could make up the time and possibly finish the job sooner. Now he was here, and I was to walk around town and try to find available girls. I chatted with a few girls, managed to dance with a few, and even got a few kisses. I exchanged a few phone numbers, promising that I would call them, but my heart wasn't in it. It was about 11:30 when Brian and Claire came and found me to tell me they were going home. Brian was leaving for a course on Tuesday, so they had things to do. Brian grinned his stupid grin and winked at me. Oh boy. They asked if I wanted to take a cab, since they lived near me. I declined. Let the lovebirds drive and have fun. Well, at least one of them did. I stayed until the party died down and walked home, still a little embarrassed. I met Brian at the pub around 7:30 on Monday. He dragged me to a table instead of standing at the bar like we usually did. He pounced on me without any preamble. I think Claire is seeing someone else. Shit. Why do you think that? Well, she wants to have more fun and try other things. I thought we were doing okay. We do it 2 or 3 times a week, but she wants more. Sorry, buddy. I don't see the problem with that. I don't know. I can't see what the big deal is. I told him the story of Kathy, a married woman who used me as a boy toy. Oh, I wasn't complaining about being used as a boy toy. My complaint was that she told me she was divorced, but she wasn't. He was in the Navy and away a lot. Apparently, that's why she always came to me, and I didn't come to her. I found this out when she came to see me one day and forgot to take off her wedding ring. This was back in the days when I didn't check for a white band or dent on the 3rd finger of my left hand. Along with that, I gave him some tips on how to improve his sex life. I went to the bar. I know he said he would pay, but I needed to stretch my legs and think about something else. While I was at the bar, I hatched a cunning plan. When I got back, I suggested to Brian that since he was going away for a couple weeks and coming home for the weekend, it would be a good time to do some research. I suggested he use this time to use his laptop and Google stuff like how to improve your life or how to drive women crazy. Then another idea occurred to me. While he was away and I had a few hours of flexible schedule that I had to use or lose, I would discreetly keep an eye on Claire on her lunch break. She goes to a hotel near where she works, and she was a member of a gym, so I could check to see if anything interesting was going on there. I could also keep an eye on their apartment. I happily agreed to this because I was pretty sure she wasn't doing anything. He seemed to like the idea and calmed down. We both went home satisfied, and not just because of the beer. He had a plan to improve her life, and then she would probably marry him. And I gave him peace of mind. I gave my 2 best friends hope. I did what I had promised Brian. I went to the hotel on Tuesday lunchtime, found a quiet corner, saw Claire arrive and headed to the pool, and went straight to the gym on Wednesday. Thursday was different, and it alarmed me. She walked in and went straight to the elevator. It was going up to the fourth floor. There was no way I could get up there to see where she went. It was a little over an hour later when she got off the elevator at the same time as the young man. It didn't look like they were together. They didn't seem to notice each other, didn't talk to each other. Moreover, it seemed as if they were studiously ignoring each other. The young man headed for the counter, and Claire walked out of the hotel. A little wrong, I thought. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up for no apparent reason. Saturday night, all three of us gathered at the pub, and I received a few mild chides from Claire for not calling any of the girls in her office. It turned out that I had been in thinking mode, trying to help my friends, imagining myself as a dark, silent, handsome, mysterious man that some of the girls in her office wanted to explore. Bullshit. I was just thinking about my buddies. But let's use this, Claire suggested, and Shirley felt a little more cheerful. I had her number, and I made a date with her for Sunday night. While Brian sat at the bar pouring drinks, Claire leaned over to me and said, "I don't know what you said to him last week, but last night was definitely better. There's still a lot of work to be done, but he even seems to want to talk about it. Although I thought I heard him say, Her Royal Highness Queen Elizabeth II at some point in the game." Sunday morning, I went to watch Brian play soccer. Claire was there as usual. I stood next to her, not too close. She's not my girlfriend, but she's nice to be around. Not too insistently, I asked if it was getting better. She gave me a leering look, smiled, and said, "He talks about all sorts of nonsense, thanks." Brian caught me at the bar after the match while Claire was powdering her nose. "Hey, mate, thanks for the advice. A Google search on how to improve my life led me to a whole bunch of women's magazines. Not what I expected. Hell, women are weird. Looks like they want to talk. Either way, I have nothing to lose. If I want to marry her, I'll have to give it a go." "Thanks, buddy. You should take your own advice." I replied in my usual buddy manner, "Back off, asshole." On Tuesday, I felt guilty about going to the hotel on my lunch break, but Claire went straight to the pool and then to the gym on Wednesday. I still didn't like Thursday, so I arrived fairly early and saw a young man get off the elevator with Claire and head to the front desk. I got an uneasy feeling. I entered the elevator with him. We went up to the third floor. I got off at the same time as him and tried to look confused. It wasn't hard. I kept an eye on which room he was going into and found a quiet corner, hoping nothing would happen. I was wrong. About 10 minutes later, Claire came out of the elevator and headed for the same room. Damn, what was I going to do now? This could easily destroy the people I loved, if she hadn't already. I went downstairs and waited in the hall. I decided to give her one chance and see what she had to say. Like last week, they both got off the elevator together, but this time, before they could separate, I stood in front of them. Claire's face lowered. "Oh, shit." The guy stepped toward me. Claire put her hand on his arm and shook her head. She looked at him and said, "Richard, goodbye. We won't see each other again. Don't mess with me." He stepped back with a confused look. She held out her hand to me, and I saw her eyes fill with tears. She pulled me to a corner of the living room with an alcove. I followed her. The first thing she said struck me to the core. "Dave, this is exactly what it looks like, and I'm going to surrender myself to your mercy. I'm going to answer any questions you have, completely truthfully and honestly. And at the end, if you see fit to tell Brian what you saw and what I'm going to tell you about, it will still be absolutely and unequivocally my fault. No blame will be placed on you." With those words, she picked up the phone and I heard her tell the office that she wasn't coming in this afternoon. She had far more important things to do than work. I was caught off guard. I had no place to start. And Claire noticed this. She waved to the waiter and ordered a Guinness and a white wine. She was very professional and businesslike. I'd never seen her like that before, and why should I? We didn't run in the same work circles. Tears were still in her eyes when she said, "You have until the end of the day. This might take a while." I just nodded. We sat in silence, waiting for our drinks to be brought in. Guinness takes a long time to pour. She sat patiently and quietly, but tears were already running down her cheeks, which she occasionally wiped away with a handkerchief. I sipped from my Guinness. I think I drank half a pint at a time. She waved for the waiter to bring another. Looking at me with sad eyes, she said, "After our conversation at the party, you've probably already guessed what this is about. Do you want me to tell the story? Or do you just want to ask questions?" I didn't understand a damn thing. I put on a confidence I didn't feel and said, "You tell the story, and I'll ask questions as I go along." She wiped away her tears again. Like I said at the party that night, I need more than Brian can give me, and he didn't want to talk about it. I didn't see a way out. Richard just feels like he's filling that hole. Hell, that's not what I meant, filling that need. You might find this hard to believe, many men do, but I can separate the entertainment from the lovemaking. Sometimes I want to be cuddled, made love to, and then I wake up in the arms of a man who loves me. And sometimes I just want good entertainment. Sorry, you're going to get hurt. Brian can't give me a second one yet. He was damn close to it on Saturday. Richard is just doing the second part. I saw no way out but to stay with Brian and get the dose of entertainment I needed. And before you ask, I don't work with him. He was someone I met at a lawyer's meeting across town. He's married and has no plans to leave his wife, and I'm just a side piece for him. We see each other once or twice a month when I have a need, rarely 2 weeks in a row, but he's checked the box, and when Brian gets back on Friday, I'll be able to cuddle in the arms of a man who loves me. That may not sound reasonable to you, but it does to me. Any questions? She was still very businesslike, like she was covering herself with a shield. A few, but I'm trying to figure out how much I really want to know. What questions are important? What answers are important? So some of them are irrelevant because I don't know what is. Like where you and he met and who proposed to whom. It doesn't matter where you met him, but who made the first move. That's easy, he heard me say. I could use some good entertainment. Turned to me and said, I could do it for a hottie, just so my wife doesn't find out. I thought he was joking. Later, he caught me as I was leaving the ladies' restroom, took me by the hand, and led me to one of the partners' offices. I won't go into details, but I got what I asked for. Are you sorry? That's a tough question. Am I sorry you caught me? I don't. Part of me says I'm glad I put it out there. Part of me says I'm glad you gave me a reason to stop, even if Brian leaves me. Part of me regrets that I won't get any more good entertainment. I'll miss it. Regret that I had to leave Brian, yes, absolutely. I don't want to say anything against Brian because it's not his fault. It's all my actions. I should have been stronger. Whether I will continue, I don't know. But probably not, now that Brian is feeling better. Brian and I have started talking, and he took some of my suggestions Sunday night, so I can see a time when Richard won't be needed. Anyway, you forced my hand. Richard will be gone. I don't regret it. She answered several of my questions at once, even the ones I didn't know I wanted answers to, or even intended to ask. I didn't want to know how many times. Once was enough. I wasn't Brian, and that would hurt him, and it would hurt me. And while I cared for her, I didn't love her the way Brian did. Do you love Brian? She didn't answer as I expected. You've seen us together. What do you think? I know the fact that you saw me with Richard makes it questionable, but I'll answer your question. Yes, absolutely. I plan to grow a pair, and the next time he asks me to marry him, I will say yes. You will consider me a conniver and a cheat, and of course you will be right. You will also ask me if I would do it again. I've given it a lot of thought, and if Richard hadn't taken the initiative, no. I was never looking to be entertained. You ask me if he's better than Brian. Yes, of course he's better than Brian in terms of pure entertainment. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done it. That's no excuse, but if Brian and I could just talk about it and he would listen to me, he could be a lot better. Heck, he's a better person just by talking to you for one night. We haven't come to that yet, and I'd still like to know, where is Margaret Thatcher here? You seem to have planned this all out. You answered all my questions as if you knew you were going to get caught. What's more, you answered some that I didn't intend to ask. No, I never expected to get caught. Those are excuses I used to justify it to myself. But honestly, once I leave Richard, I forget about him until I get the itch. By the way, how did you catch us? When we got off the elevator, we could have been anyone, but the look on your face almost killed me, and I wasn't going to lie to you. I told her that Brian was doubting all these increased requests to engage in this, almost as if it was coerced. She looked at it in amazement, and to calm him down, I offered to follow her because I was sure nothing was going on, and I had the receipts from the hotel to prove to Brian that I was here, and I was going to make him pay for my coffee and beer. I told her that I had seen her last Thursday, and while there was nothing inappropriate, when I saw her with this guy, my hair stood up. So I got here earlier in the week, saw Richard checking into his room, followed him in, and saw her walk into the same room. Shit, she said. It wasn't a guilty pleasure. I was just trying to make him better. I was just trying to make him into the lover I know he can be. He's good at everything else. He just needs a little help with that. Oh shit. I had a lot to think about. I have a couple questions. Why didn't you ask me not to tell Brian? That seemed to throw her off balance. I wouldn't have done that to you. It wouldn't have been fair to either of you. I wouldn't ask you to choose between me and him. I know what you two have done in the past and how much you cared for each other. I wouldn't ask you to put me above him. I know you like me, but not that much. I'm sorry. I like you and you're a good friend. So I couldn't do that to you either. Before you tell Brian, can I ask you a favor? One last one, because he's definitely going to dump me, kick me out. And I don't think you're going to be my friend for long. She reached across the table to take my hand. I yanked it away like I'd been bitten and didn't let her touch me. I guess I deserved it. Tears stood in her eyes. Let me tell him, please. I'll be honest with him, right down to the fact that you caught us, and I asked you to let me be the bearer of bad news. I can't let his best friend tell him when I'm breaking his heart myself. I looked at her and stood up. I want to scream and yell at you and call you every name under this goddamn sun. I need to think, if I make a mistake, I'm going to ruin a whole bunch of friendships, mine and Brian's, yours and Brian's, mine and yours, and a whole bunch more. I paused. Until an hour ago, I treasured our friendship. With those words, I left, leaving even a near pint of Guinness on the table, more important than a good beer or even a Guinness. Damn, blast and damn again. What the hell to do now? The first task is to protect Brian. But how and from what? From his inadequacy, her cheating, his goddamn heartache? I didn't sleep that night, but I didn't drink too much beer either. Solutions didn't come through the alcoholic haze, but by morning, I had a plan. I knew Brian wouldn't be home until 5 o'clock that evening, but I know how these courses can go, especially on a Friday. I don't think he'll be home closer to an hour than 5, and I don't want to be caught having a deep conversation with his girlfriend. I sent Claire a message saying, go shopping in Waitrose at 10 o'clock. I'll bump into you, we'll have a coffee, and I'll give you some options. Delete this message now. I got to the supermarket, grabbed a basket and started wandering around, stuffing stuff into it. I don't use wet wipes. I wash my hands with soap and water. So what the hell were they doing in my basket? I knew what a bottle of gin was doing in there. We bumped into each other right at the entrance to the cafe. We went inside, she sat down, and I grabbed 2 coffees. As I handed her mine, I got my first good look at her face. I had seen my face in the mirror and looked rough and knew how I felt, but she looked much worse and must have felt it too. This time, my balls grew, and I started. Looking her straight in the eye, in a voice I didn't quite recognize as my own, I began. Part of me hates you, and part of me loves you like a sister. I didn't sleep last night. As a man, I understand what you're getting at if you want to share the fun and the love, because I did. Katie was a prime example. And as much as I want to hate you for it, I can't. I can't be such a hypocrite. I figured if someone told him, it was okay to do as you said. But I have an alternative. Confusion flashed in her eyes. There was only one way this could end for her. We'll never tell him what you did. I reasoned so she didn't have coffee in her mouth or a cup in her hand. I'd never seen anyone look so surprised. When I sat down at the table with the coffee, I think she saw the Grim Reaper sitting on my shoulder. What? How? When? How? What? It's my suggestion. We'll never tell him. There are a few things you said. He gets better. He starts talking. He listens to you. While he was gone, he Googled something on the internet, and it led him to a whole bunch of women's magazines. He says women are weird, and he's probably not wrong. But that's why he was more inclined to listen to you this week. You told me what you should have told him. He told me what he should have told you. You two need to talk together. I know you've been trying and he's been fighting you off. But from what I understand from your conversations, it started happening last weekend. So if you promise me on your mother's grave, and I know she's not dead yet, that you will never cheat on him and will love him until the day one of you leaves this earth, I won't tell him and will leave it up to you. I will still listen and help you both, because I love you both. The look on her face was as if the Grim Reaper sitting on my shoulder had just fallen off his perch. You'd do that for me? For Brian and me? Yes, I'll do it for my two dearest friends, all their parents, and quite selfishly for me too. But if you let him down one more time, I'll spread those sordid details far and wide. She was already openly crying and running out of paper napkins. I even handed her my handkerchief, having bought a clean one and a spare. She'd cried a lot the last few times we'd met. Yeah, hell yeah, anything, absolutely anything, she said. Right now, some harsh realities, and hopefully this will help more. I didn't bother telling her about Sharon Pontic White. I hinted that I was rinsing down there and the taste of soap made him think of blowing bubbles. I didn't pursue the subject further. I suppressed the embarrassment in me and told her how I had treated Katie, and I told Brian the same thing. I tried to help her so she could help him. She sat there with a stunned expression on her face, and I don't know what surprised her more, what I had done, or the fact that I dared to tell her what I had done to Katie. I got up. I needed to leave urgently and told her. I'm completely exhausted. You've worn me out. I'm playing rugby tomorrow afternoon. Maybe I'll see you there. Maybe I won't. If you're not there tomorrow as a couple, well, I'll see you then. I walked out. I paid for the gin but left the napkins. That was it. The deed was done. Time to move on. At least Brian would still be around. Of that I was sure. We pulled ourselves up, slapping each other on the back, yelling at each other, calling each other names as we ran out of the pavilion. Right at the foot of the steps stood Brian and Claire, the biggest smile on her face. And he was just as happy as Larry. He gave me 2 thumbs up. He was laughing heartily. I don't remember much about the game. They told me I ran like the wind and we won the game. I didn't see them that weekend or the next. They were gone for a few days. The following Wednesday, I got a call from Claire asking if I would be at the club on Friday night. It sounded like she was asking me to be there, and I told her I would. There was a small disco going on, not very loud music, more like background noise. The 3 of us sat in an alcove. Claire had a serious look on her face, and I noticed she hadn't had much to drink. She sat between us, and suddenly, as the music faded, she turned to Brian. I felt her hand touch my thigh, which was a little strange, but then she found my hand and squeezed it. Looking Brian straight in the face, she said, "Are you going to ask me?" "Ask you what?" "You know, the question you've been puzzling over for the last 6 months." "Oh, shit. Oh, does that mean you're ready?" Stupid fool, I thought to myself. Maybe it was the beer. Well, you won't know until you ask. Surprisingly, he did it right. Shuffling over to the edge of the pew, he got down on one knee and said, "Claire Wolstenholme, will you do me the great honor of becoming my wife?" Everyone noticed Brian kneeling, and there was silence in the hall. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes," she said. Squeezing my hand lightly, she released it, slid over to him, and buried her face in his. 6 months later, they were married. And yes, I did hit it off with one of the bridesmaids, but not the main one. She was married. It was Harriet, and she and I dated for the next 18 months. I took Harriet very seriously, and she moved in with me for a while. 18 months after they were married, young Daniel came along and I was his godfather. That's when Harriet left me. When the christening had subsided and only a few of our close friends remained, I got down on one knee and asked Harriet to marry me. She didn't hold back but stood up, said no, and walked out the door. Everyone was stunned. My two best friends hugged me while I cried. When I got home, Harriet had already moved out. A couple weeks later, we met for a cup of coffee, and she explained that she couldn't share me, couldn't share her love. I had no idea what she meant. 14 months later, Daniel was joined by Kirsty, and once again, I was the godfather. I went to this christening alone. Things went my way. Over the years, I'd had several girlfriends. None lasted longer than a couple of years, and I resigned myself to leaving this world a bachelor. I was rarely alone. My two best friends made sure of that. Daniel went into the army. I was at his parade at Sandhurst and at Kirsty's graduation from university. Both kids had difficulties along the way, but they turned out to be good people. I was getting on. At 53, you're too old to play rugby, your bones don't heal as well, and I wasn't as fast as I used to be. Brian called me and asked me to meet them on Monday at a pub on the other side of town. We hadn't met at that pub on Monday since the day he told me he thought Claire was cheating on him. That alarmed me a little, but I was even more alarmed when we got there. He was sitting in the same alcove we'd sat in all those years ago, and he looked rough, very rough. I saw him last week, and he looked rough, but not as bad as he looked now. There was a kind of sadness about him. I started, "You look a bit shit, mate. Is everything all right?" Actually, no. Everything is pretty screwed up. Remember when we set the dumpster on fire after smoking our first and last cigarette, and we had to do a lung cancer study? It's not lung cancer, but it's cancer, leukemia. I reached out and grabbed him, and my world came crashing down. I opened my mouth to say something, but he held up his hand and I stopped. "Sorry, buddy. This is bad. I just discovered this disease and it's untreatable. I've got a month. No more. I'm never going back to that goddamn pub again." And that's when I noticed Claire standing on the other side of me. She pulled herself close to me, and the three of us cried our eyes out. "Isn't there anything they can do?" Claire replied. "No, it's gone too far. We didn't know he had it. He just felt tired, so we went to bed early. When he woke up last week looking like that, I made him go to the doctor. He refused. He said it was work and he was just tired." I won't describe the next 3 weeks. They were pretty shitty. The week before Brian died, I was at the hospital visiting him. He gave me an envelope and told me to open it when he left. He made me promise not to open it until then. I promised. The funeral was crowded and we went to a club. Daniel was married and had children, as did Kirsty, and we tried to make it a joyous occasion, a celebration of life, but it was hard work. As we entered the club, Claire asked me if I had the envelope. Yes, it was in the inside pocket of my jacket. I just tapped it, and she smiled at me. I forgot about it until I got home, and then I wasn't in the mood and left it in my jacket. I didn't know how my relationship with Claire would play out. We met for a cup of coffee during the week. She was holding up well, perhaps even better than I was. About a month after the funeral, she called me to see if I could go over to their house and help Daniel. They wanted to move some beds. I arrived, as requested, on Saturday afternoon. Daniel needed help to remove an old bed from his bedroom because he was taking it to his house. Then to take the double bed from Brian and Claire's room and put it in his old room. Claire had a new bed. I couldn't always understand the logic with which Claire approached the situation. But what she wanted, she got. The new bed arrived just as we finished moving the others, and Danelle and I assembled it. After the sweaty work, we were sitting in the kitchen drinking cold old speckle hens when Daniel said to me, "Uncle David." He hadn't called me uncle since he left for the army. This was getting weird. "You haven't read the letter yet, have you?" "No. Knowing your father, he'll just thank me for everything I've done, which isn't really necessary. And when I do, it will seem to me like he's really gone. The whole time I leave the letter unopened, as if part of it is still here." I thought about it for a bit and said to Daniel, "That's not the point. Do you know what's in there?" "I don't know, but I'm guessing. I think Mom wants you to open it." I promised him I would read it as soon as I got home. We drank a few more beers and I headed home. As I had a few beers, Claire asked me to let her know when I was coming over in case I wandered into the woods or something. I sent her a text. "This isn't going to be easy. I poured myself a large glass of gin and tonic, which was a lot of gin and not much tonic. I opened the letter and began to read it. It was handwritten and had a few crossouts in it. Buddy, you think that with this letter, I am thanking you for being my best friend for over 50 years. And it will make you cry? It will be a trip down memory lanes. Sally kisses Charlie and also throws up in the trash can we just lit with our first and last cigarette. We both got pinks for it, but didn't tell our parents because they'd give us another spanking. Collecting pocket money to pay for the glass of the greenhouse we broke with a cricket ball. Actually had to throw a tennis ball. My old banger, 20 miles per gallon, because the other 20 miles per gallon was leaking out of a broken pipe and we were stuck overnight in Skegness. God, it was so cold to sleep in the car. There were several girlfriends until we met Claire. That's when I realized she was the one for me. Yeah, that month when I thought she was cheating on me was hard. She was different from everyone else. I cared, really cared, but I was doing it all wrong. I was a bit macho, thinking I knew everything about how to give a woman pleasure. But I didn't, and you, as always, stepped in and helped me, by the way. I found a phrase that really slowed me down. Try memorizing it, let alone uttering it when you're 2 steps away from dropping your load. Not that you need it, but it works. The Honorable Margaret Thatcher, leader of the Conservative Party, Prime Minister of Her Royal Highness Elizabeth II of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland and Queen, head of the Commonwealth, defender of the faith. How bloody difficult it was, but it worked. And I know the help you gave Claire in those couple weeks before she accepted my offer. Your decision was the right one. I didn't think so when she told me, but we talked about it, and I'm grateful. Because that decision must have caused you a lot of pain. Calm down, buddy. It was the right one. Because of you, I have lived a wonderful life. I have lived and loved a wonderful woman, and she has given me 2 beautiful children and many grandchildren. Without your clear thinking that day, it would never have happened. Thanks, buddy. Now for the kids. The time you spent talking to Daniel while he was at Sandhurst and struggling. The time you ran miles and miles with him without saying anything. When he came back from Iraq, he told me how you hugged him and he poured his heart out to you when he lost that guy in his platoon. He wanted to show me he could handle it, to make me proud of him. I was glad you encouraged him to come to me. Crying with my son after what he'd been through was very humbling. You were there for Kirsty when she fell into bad company. She did things her mother and I wouldn't have approved of. She told me how you yelled at her, made her feel so small, told her she was better. We never talked about that little trip to her university with baseball bats. I remember looking at the flames of the fire we made out of clothes and baseball bats, and you holding me. And thank you for being there for me, and not letting that jerk blind me. This is Claire's first account of that little escapade. I hope we helped you, especially when Harriet dumped you, we saw how much it hurt. But when she did, and how she did it, and what she said to you, it made us think. And we looked at things differently. Claire and I think that's the reason you're lonely too. This is the hardest thing for you, not me, because A, I'm not here anymore. B, Claire and I realized this a long time ago. In fact, you're probably the only one who doesn't see it. You love Claire. Because you love me as a mate, you've pushed it away. You've buried it. Harriet saw it, and so did many other girls. That's why they didn't stay. They loved you, but they couldn't share you. This may come as a surprise to you, but she always really liked you. But after your decision not to tell me what happened while I was away, that liked turned into loved. It started out as brotherly love. But after everything you did for us, it grew. It didn't bother me because I knew she loved me more than she loved you. And anyway, I love you too. So now I'd like to ask you for a couple more favors. 1. Look after my wife as much as you can. She is very, very dear to me, and I know you will do a brilliant job at it. 2. Do not marry her for 1 year and 1 day after my funeral. It's not for me. I'm not here. I'm only in your heart. But my parents might not take it very well. Oh, I think Danny and Kirsty would be over the moon if you asked her. One more thing. She's a warm, wonderful woman, so please don't wait a year and a day to cement your love. You have my full blessing. Okay, buddy. That's it for now. I'm tired. And by the way, Claire is sitting next to me as I write this. She helps me when I'm having a hard time writing. So, buddy, I will ask you to continue to take care of my family as you have done for the last 30 plus years. Goodbye, and thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your best friend in the world, Brian. The letter was soaked in my tears. I couldn't think. I finished my gin and tonic and almost choked. Suddenly, I felt a hand on my shoulder and almost jumped out of my skin. I turned around and there was Claire. She was crying. I really should have locked the damn back door, but it didn't matter, though. She had a key to my house anyway. Brian and I were right. Do you love me? I don't know. Had I been hiding it all this time to protect Brian? I really don't know. I pulled her back at arm's length and she tilted her head slightly to one side and smiled, her face lighting up. I think you're still trying to hide it, she said. Let me make it easy for you. Since that day at Waitrose, I've fallen more and more in love with you, and it's grown into love. Don't get me wrong, I love Brian a lot more, but who could not love a man for all that you've done for us? I didn't mind being second best. She took my hand and led me towards the stairs, looking at me and saying, I think it's time. It was a weird party between Christmas and New Year's Eve, and almost everyone was there. My parents, Brian and Claire's parents, Daniel and Kirsty and their tribes. It was like people were walking on the edge. My three dads caught me in a corner. They were kind of corralling me. Brian's father, Jonathan, looked me straight in the eye and said, When are you going to ask her? About what? Claire to marry you, of course. Who said that? Then Claire's father spoke his word. Well, it's obvious to everyone but you. Daniel and Kirsty can't wait. You've been part of their family for so long that this will be the final stage. You're not replacing their dad, you're an added bonus. It's almost like they have two dads. I gave in. Jonathan, Brian wrote me a letter before he died. He told me things I didn't know about myself. And yes, I will ask her. But he asked me to wait a year and a day because he didn't want to upset you. He wasn't sure how you would take it. It was my father's turn. We watched you grow up and saw the messes you both got into. And if some of the rumors are true, you've done some things recently. Jonathan continued. Listen, son, we have your full blessing. Don't wait. Don't waste any time. And we're not getting any younger. They let me go. I went back into the living room and there was silence. I looked around the room. Everyone was looking at me. It was a bloody setup. Brian's mother was fiddling with her fingers. She walked over to me and put something in my hand. I looked down. It was a wedding ring. I'll only lend it to you until you buy yourself a normal one. I was about to walk over to Claire when suddenly she was beside me. I got down on one knee and mouthed the words. She held out her hand to me, and as I slipped the ring on her finger, the room erupted in joyous screams. Not very romantic. I kissed her and whispered in her ear. This is all a setup. How much of this did you know? All of it. Who do you think set it up? I love you. We were married 6 weeks later. I told Daniel and Kirsty to never call me daddy, never call me uncle. They never called me daddy, but to annoy me, they sometimes called me uncle with a smile on their face. After all these years, I realized that yes, I did love her. But strangely enough, it was from that day when she was brutally frank with me in the hotel lobby. Her willingness to look at things dispassionately, yet take absolutely all the blame and try to protect Brian and I and our relationship as buddies. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.
Alright, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, No one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was. As the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.